through the book of Acts. I don't know if you can see that, but that is a sailing ship having a bad day, forgetting how to be ship is what's happening to that boat. And we're going to get to that in just a moment. I do want to touch on this again. I wonder, how many of us knew when you started out reading the Bible all the way through this year, how many lists of names there were in the Bible? Long, weird names. And, I encourage you to read them out loud. Did you do it? How many of you went, and Fred begat something like Trevor, and but hadn't it been great, even with all these names, establishing ourselves into the history of this real people, setting our lives into the lives of these real people of God who love Him and lived lives devoted to Him? Hasn't it been great? How many of us, I'm curious, how many of us are glad that we're doing this? Yeah, and Job's hard, isn't it? Job is filled with sorrow. Isn't it good to have guidance from God on how to handle sorrow? I agree, it's a hard book to read, but man, I'm glad it's there, because I've been through times when I needed God to show up and tell me, hey, you don't know everything. Which is what we get this week. This week we get to the amazing and surprising showing up of God. Isn't it good? Are you still reading? Are you still working this thing? Isn't it great? I'm glad we're doing this. It's been a blessing in my life and in the life of my family. So the last time I got to preach here, we talked about having a faithful heart on a bad day. You remember that? This is kind of a two-part lesson. Normally I wouldn't have my niece get married in the middle of that. But, I'm not in charge. But this is kind of part two to that, where we look again at the idea of faithfulness in a bad day. A bad day. That's a car, by the way. That's someone looking at their car going, I remember when I had car. I don't have a car anymore. I have heart. Or a bad day. This is someone taking a picture of their kids in the swing and one of the chains have broken. And that person, I don't know if you can see, that's a leg up behind, that's still holding onto the chain, but they're about to have a bad day. That may be a visit to the hospital kind of day. That kind of day. Where, it'll make it home, no problem. It'll be fine. And I know that there's that one bump, but it'll be okay. It is not okay. I don't know if you can read the sign. At least her jacket's red. That's a bad deal, not her pants. That's right. She's going to be stripy. I don't know if you can read the text that's up there, so I copied it down here. I'll just give you a moment. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding? A porcupine fell out of a tree on her head? That's not a good day. And this is kind of how I started last time. Remember this? Where we looked at all the bad days. And then immediately after that, after I preached that, do you recognize that? That's a diagram of a furnace/HVAC system. There are many things that can go wrong with a furnace/HVAC system, especially if the people who own the house before you used a 16 by 20 filter instead of a 16 by 7/8 by 21 filter. That's bad. Because I've been replacing 16 by 20 filters, and that's not correct. And so my furnace began to not do what furnaces should do. It was more doing what water filters should do, except even those shouldn't leak all over the floor. And then, there are also a great many things that can go wrong with your nicely equipped 2007 Ford Ranger. I discovered this in the parking lot last week. when I couldn't shift into any forward gears. I could reverse quite well, quite dramatically, but I could not go forward at all. And of course, I had just preached about having a bad day. And so you know what I had to do? I griped and complained like a 4-year-old girl. No, not girl. Yeah, of course, because girls do that more than. I'm in so much trouble right now. I'm having a bad day. Yeah, no, but the thing is, if you're going to believe a thing when the sun is shining, you got to believe a thing when it starts raining, right? And so somehow, I've been looking at my bad week and saying, you know what? I don't know how, but God's going to take care of this. But you're all right. I am confident that the Lord will see me through this, and even if He doesn't see me through this, even if I die, which I don't think I'm going to do, unless the furnace actually blows up because I drove the truck into it, but backwards. Even then, it's going to be okay. Hard days call for faithfulness. And some of you are facing hard days, aren't you? We got to be faithful and mean it. And it's easy to say that on pleasant days. But on a bad day, you got to say it too. Because the Lord Jesus Christ is Lord of the good day and He's Lord of the bad day. Because He's Lord of our lives. So, why though? Why do you got to say it? Why does the Christian have to keep that British stiff upper lip? That courageous Christian spirit. Why do we need to do it? What possible good can come from having a faithful attitude when things are hard? Folks, people are watching you. Anybody that knows you're a Christian is watching you. They're paying attention. And that, I think, is why this story takes so long in the book of Acts. So much ink is spilled about the bad days that Paul has. The terrible long storm at sea where 14 days or more they don't see the sun or the stars, nothing, and they're tossing their cookies because the ship is tossing on the waves and everything is bad, and it's a ship big enough for 276 persons, but it's still rocking around like a cork, and it's hard, and he's faithful. But today we're going to finish up that story, and we're going to talk just a little bit about what happens at the end of it. They come to the island of Malta. They don't know it's Malta, but they come to an island, and Paul has told them what's going to happen. God's going to deliver us all. Right? We're going to make it. But striking a reef, they're trying to make harbor. They see where they want to go. But they've thrown the tackle overboard. They lift the sail, but they don't have a whole lot of control. And this out-of-control boat runs into a reef. And striking a reef, the bow stuck and remained immovable in a heavy surf. That's bad, because the heavy surf is going to do what it says. And the stern was being broken up by the surf. So the boat is literally coming apart. Can you imagine that? Has anybody here ever been on a cruise? You've been out you ever hit rough water in a cruise? Have you ever had your boat torn to pieces in a cruise? Do you think if that happened, you'd talk about it? I bet you would tell that story. I bet you that, like 20 years later, your grandkids would be like, oh no, it's the boat story again. Because that would be like one of the big ones you would tell over and over and over again. Anytime you had an audience, it'd be like, hey, let me tell you what happened to me. My boat came apart. I mean, you would go on and on about it, and you would be maybe a little bit like, can you believe it? You should feel sorry for me, huh? That's the kind of circumstance they're in. This is the kind of situation where people die. Okay? It is, and we're talking obvious that people die. If your boat comes apart, somebody's going to drown. Although, interestingly, that boat coming apart allows for pieces of wood to be floating around that people who cannot swim can grab hold of. If the boat hadn't come apart, somebody would have drowned, trying to get to shore. They would have drowned out there on the reef. It's far enough out, they would have died. But the boat came apart so that people could make it. And the people who can swim can make it, and the people who can't swim can make it. And well, but maybe not all of them are going to get off the boat. The soldiers' plan was to kill the prisoners lest any should swim away and escape. And that probably becomes known. Okay, let's kill them all. Maybe they line them up to start cutting off their heads. On the rocking boat that's coming apart, we've got to kill all these prisoners. Because why? Because if a prisoner gets away, whatever was supposed to happen to the prisoner happens to the guard. Well, I don't want that. Let's just go ahead and have their trial right here. But the centurion, wishing to save Paul, kept them from carrying out their plans. Now see, that's not once, but twice they're in a situation where people die. That's a bad day, right? But he ordered those who could swim to jump overboard first and to make for the land, and the rest on planks or pieces of the ship. So it was that they were all brought to safety on the land. All of them made it. Now there were people waiting for them when they got there. There's islanders. Can you imagine watching that happen? You're watching a boat come apart out in the water. You're like, oh, dude, people are going to die. If you want the emotional feeling of that, do you remember September 11th? Those of you who were alive to watch that and see it, do you remember what it was like to watch that on your TV? That was a bad experience, wasn't it? That's a bad day. That's this day. On a smaller scale, but it's the same sort of thing. You're watching people and you know they're going to die. If you live on an island, you've seen people who didn't make it. They wash up on shore. Fishermen die all the time in the ancient world. They know what they were looking at, and they know people are going to die. Except none of them do. None of them do. Now, that's what we refer to as a really bad day. That's what we refer to as a memorable bad day. The kind of day where you tell the story about it later and you talk about it. And what's Paul's attitude? Well, wait, we're not done with the bad day yet, because Paul hadn't met this fellow yet. He's still got something else to go through. His bad day's not done, right? So what happened when Paul was gathering a bundle of sticks, because they want a fire. The natives had lit them fires because they know they've just come out of the drink. They're soaking wet. They're cold. They could still catch, fever or something and die. Warm them back up. We've got to get these people dry. So they lit fires. Paul goes out to collect wood, right? He goes out and collects a bundle of sticks, put them in a fire, and a viper came out because of the heat, which means there's a viper and he's carrying the sticks and there's a snake in there. What a lucky dude, right? And he throws them into the fire, and the snake now is free from the wood. So it's in the fire, and it doesn't die. It jumps out of the fire and grabs hold of his hand and says it fastened on his hand. And when the native people saw the creature hanging on his hand, they said to one another, no doubt this man's a murderer, though he escaped from the sea. Justice, and that's probably a goddess, justice, has not allowed him to live. Right? So he's got a snake hanging on him. Now, the thing is, vipers, the kind of vipers that we have in like northern Africa and around the Mediterranean basin, they're not as mild as rattlesnakes, okay? You get bitten by a rattlesnake, you might die. You're certainly going to have a bad day, right? But you get bitten by one of these things. There's a snake in Kenya called the black mamba. Have you ever heard of a black mamba? Black mamba, the Kipsigis name for black mamba is actually translates to an English sentence. Its name is, turn around and look at your house. Because when the snake bites you, you have time to turn around and look at your house, and then you fall down dead. They have super fast-acting neurotoxins. One of these days, I'll tell you a story about how I was using the restroom in Africa, and one of these crawled in with me. That's what we call a memorable bad day. But that's what's just That's the kind of thing. I don't know what color it is. In fact, from the story, you can't actually tell the etymology of the thing, but it's very likely a pit viper. And it's jumped out and it's bit his hand. And they all know this thing. They're familiar with it. They're ready for him to die, right? And to die ugly, too. Because when you die from this thing, it results in massive swelling. Your skin splits. It's very gross. Very gross and very fast. But when he shook the creature off into the fire and suffered no harm, they were waiting for him to swell up or suddenly fall down dead. But when they had waited a long time and so no misfortune had come to him, they changed their minds and they said that he was a god. Right? Okay, so I think the reason Luke includes those details about the observations of the native folks is so that we can all know this was not no big deal. That's a bad, bad day. That is a series of bad events after a long time. But what I want you to notice about what Paul is like in all of this, did you notice it? First a shipwreck, then a viper attack, and I don't have this in my notes, but also being mistaken for a god, that's not something Paul wants. He wants people to believe in Jesus, not in him. Okay? So be honest with me now. What would your mood be like after this day? And just take a moment and reflect. How would you be doing? Think about how you've responded to more trivial bad days. 3 times almost dead. Have you almost died 3 times in the last year in the same day? Your ship breaks apart. The soldiers want to kill you. A snake tries to kill you. It's like Satan is really aiming at you and he keeps missing, but he almost gets you enough so that you know you got shot at. Have you been there? I have never been in that bad of a day. Now think about your bad day. Whatever your bad day is. What was your attitude like? What'd you do? Did you complain? Did you cry? Did you bellyache? Did you get mad at God? Shake your fist at Him a little? What was your day like? What were you like on the bad day? Because this is what Paul was like. He's having that day, and he's out serving other people. Why is he out collecting firewood? He should be sitting by the fire. He was in the water too. He should be sitting down getting warmed up. Let people who are dry do this. But Paul is thinking about other people on his bad day. Paul's attitude is to continue to be a servant on his bad day. Paul doesn't let his bad day undo who he is. He continues to know that Jesus Christ is his King, and though in this world he will have trouble, Christ has overcome the world. He knows it. So nothing can steal his courage. Nothing can steal his center, his heart set in faithfulness. And it not only is there as an idea, but it's there in action. He's living faithfully in hard times. He faces the devastation and the trouble and the fear and the pain with a faithful heart. Now, folks, I'm willing to admit I look at this with amazing admiration. I am sincerely impressed. And I make this my goal, don't you? I will confess to you that sometimes on bad days, I complain. I am not yet where Paul is, but I hope to be. And I'm willing to put it in front of myself and of you, because this is what the Scripture is saying. But again, remember, people are watching. This is my question for Paul. Don't you know this? That on bad days you're allowed to grope and mope and complain? Apparently not. Apparently he doesn't know that at all. So what is the fruit of all this faithful courage? That's the title of my sermon. What is the fruit of this? Well, people are watching. Now, in the neighborhood of that place were the lands belonging to the chief man of the island, named Publius. Poor guy. I'm sorry. It's just, every time I've read that, I've like, funny name. That's kind of funny. Anyway, Publius, who received us and entertained us hospitably for 3 days. It happened that the father of Publius lay sick with fever and dysentery, and Paul visited him and prayed and put his hands on him and healed him. Now, think about it. His ship blew up. It came apart around him. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he's got some significant bruising, some pain, some aches in his back. He's got plenty of reason to be sad and grouchy and mad and to make some time about himself. No, he's going into this dude's house. He's talking with him. And the guy receives him with hospitality, which we'll talk about a little more in just a second. But then the guy says, hey, my dad's sick. I guarantee you he's talking about Jesus and Jesus' power, because why else does he take him to his dad? But don't you know Paul's tired? But no, I'm going to heal this man. And not just this man, but when this had taken place, the rest of the people on the island show up. And he's got to deal with all of the sick, all of them. And the whole island of Malta, he's healing all of these people. Now, I'll ask this question. Did Publius become a Christian? Well, if you look at the text, it doesn't come out and say, any more than it comes out and says that Paul talked about Jesus and preached. But I've read a couple of scholars who point to the idea that the fact that Publius was so hospitable to him suggests that he did. That one of the marks of Christian conversion that you see throughout the book of Acts is that the converted person welcomes Paul into his home. And that the extended 3 days of hospitality are meant to suggest that Paul, that the author that I like the most here, he suggests, look, Luke's at the point where he doesn't have to tell you Paul's going to preach. He assumes you know that. You've been watching him. And he doesn't have to come out and describe a conversion, because you know what that looks like. But he shows you the fruit of it. He shows you the fruit of it. And I would suggest that after having my dad healed from something that's going to kill him if he's not healed, I'd be throwing in with Jesus, wouldn't you? So, and as I said, the hospitality is the evidence of Christian conversion. Now, as we think about this, for which of these encounters with Publius, with his dad, with the people on the beach, with all of them, which of these things can Paul take credit for? I mean, which one of those did he plan? What was his mission strategy to save the people on the island of Malta? He didn't have one. He wasn't supposed to go to the island of Malta. That's not where they were headed. They were supposed to go to Rome. You know, he should have landed somewhere close to Rome and hiked into the inland. He didn't plan any of this. It was the bad day that made this possible. No bad day, no encounter with Publius. And if Publius is rescued, no bad day, no salvation of Publius. You see that? But would he have been able to do it if Paul had been doing that? You know, would he have been able, would he have been effective, would he have been able to reach out to Publius if this had been his approach? Oh man, this is always happening to me. I go to jail all the time and now my ship blew up. If that's what he had done, or if he'd been like, leave me alone, I don't want you to come near me, everyone stay away, I'm having a bad day. You know, or oh man, it's just hard to be me. If that had been his approach, do you think that he would have met Publius? Folks, people believe what you do more than they believe what you say. Because people believe that your actions reveal what you really believe, no matter what you say. Your theology can be amazing. You can know all of the Bible and be able to talk to it forwards and backwards. And if you're a jerk, it doesn't matter. People can know all about, you can clearly be able to talk about all the things that a Christian needs to do. And if in your own life you don't live it, nobody cares. Nobody responds to Christians who don't live like Christians. Very often people are probably right. Now, folks, I want to be very real with us as a church. 2016 has been a hard year, hasn't it? We've faced some hard days. We have had a leader leave us for something that is not us. And it has hurt us. I don't know about you, but I am devastated by that. I still am. And every time I think about it, I'm moved to complain. I'm moved towards tears if I'm not real careful. And let's face it, our numbers, they're not flying up. I mean, honestly, this is great today. It's wonderful to look out and see such a great gathering of people. But we've had some Sundays where we've been pretty small, haven't we? Has it been discouraging? Has it been hard? And we've seen bad days, haven't we? And as individuals and persons, I know I complained about my furnace, sort of. I mean, I talked about it anyway. And I know that you've had your own furnace. And some of your furnaces have been crucibles that have burned your heart a whole lot more than having, a wet floor or a bad truck problem. We've had bad days, haven't we? How do we behave in the bad day? What kind of faith can people see? What do they see when they look at us? Because they do look at us. And the most powerful thing that you can do as an evangelist, eventually, if you're going to be able to evangelize, eventually you're going to have to talk about Jesus. It's just part of the deal. But one of the most powerful things that you can do to open that door is to be faithful in hard times. Faithfulness doesn't pretend you're not having hard times, but it doesn't gripe about it either. It's the willingness to say, well, that's hard. I'm not sure how I'm going to get through it, but I believe in God. And God will see me through this. Because people are watching. I heard this quote several years ago. It says, the single greatest cause of atheism in the world today is Christians who acknowledge Jesus with their lips, walk out the door and deny Him by their lifestyle. That is what an unbelieving world finds simply unbelievable. That's a hard quote, isn't it? The converse of that is also true. That when we live Christianly, though they slay me, yet I will trust in Him. When they see that kind of faithfulness on the hard day, they say there must be a God in that person's life. You and the way you live may be the only Bible that some people are willing to read. And if you live that way, maybe eventually they'll get to the pages. But they need to see the pages in you before they will be able to look at the pages, because they've already decided there's nothing for them in that. But if they see what's in that for you, then they can. And one of the best ways to show them what it's doing for you is to live faithfully when times are hard. Because the fruit of faithfulness is Publius. The fruit of faithfulness is the salvation of others. When you trust God and they see it, people are watching, and when you trust God and they see the conviction of your heart and your faithfulness in hard times, when they see how you grieve, when they see how you stand up tall when things are difficult, when they see it, they will say, wow, what do they have that I don't? Because if that happened to me, I wouldn't be where they are. So what do they have? Because I want it too. I believe that's what Publius did. How you doing with this? Look into your life and be honest with yourself. Hard days come to everybody. You've had one not too long ago. How'd you do? Pass the test? Were you found with a joy even in your sorrow, even with the tears on your cheeks? Were you still rejoicing? Or as you look into your heart, do you see one who grumbles and complains and approaches the hard day without faith? Not without belief, but without faith. How are we doing? Because the faithful stand strong in courage and knowledge that Christ Jesus has saved them even from this. And it's all going to be all right. If you look in your heart today and you're like, man, I'm not doing well. I need people to pray for me that I can face things better. Let us know. We'll pray for you. We absolutely will. And even if you don't come here, talk to someone else. Talk to one of your friends that you trust and say, this convicted me. I need prayer. Would you pray for me? It may be that you came to this place with a sorrow or trouble. And maybe you're having a bad day right now and you need the prayers of the saints so that you can stand courageous. Let us know. We want to pray for you. And it may be that you're not a Christian. Know this. Christianity is the best way of life that there is, bar none. And it's the only way of life that goes on forever. And it's a way of life that gives us courage to stand in the hard day. And if you're not a Christian, this is the day to become one. If this morning you're subject to the invitation of God, there's room right here. Why don't you come while we stand and sing?